welcome back to another episode of Why I Love BNI, your podcast spotlighting different businesses in different BNI chapters and even different BNI regions, in our matter of fact, on a little bit about their business, how BNI has helped them with their business, and just a little bit about all of our journey. So today, I'm super excited to have our guest Daniel with us today. Daniel, thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Macy, thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. Well, Daniel and I got connected through Michelle Ray, who is the regional director here in BNI Central Florida. And it's just such a great connection. And I think it really goes to show how helpful everyone is in BNI. I've talked to Michelle maybe once or twice, and she was like, Daniel, I think we even talked maybe months ago, but she still thought of me when Daniel was talking a little bit about podcasting. So you never know who knows people, and I'm just so thankful I got connected to Daniel. So thank you again for the time. I really appreciate it. So why don't we kick it off and you can just share a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your business.
Absolutely. So I'm Daniel Talbott, and I was born and raised actually here in Vero Beach, Florida, where I am now. I spent a little time in the Bay Area, which kind of shined a light on this world and people getting into business and entrepreneurship. And coming from a family of entrepreneurs, it really rounded out who I am as a professional. So in the spirit of all of that, I founded and am the broker of Right Exit. Right
That's
Exit is
mhm.
a business sales and exit planning firm where we help business owners find the right buyer for the right price at the right time.
That's perfect. I didn't know that you came from a family of entrepreneurs. What did your family do when you were a kid?
Yeah, so my father is a land surveyor and owned his own surveying business here in the on the Treasure Coast. My mother is still currently a residential real estate agent. My grandparents owned insurance agency and bail bonds agency where I got my
Oh,
start.
that's so cool. So how do you think, is there anything that you learned while you were a kid? This has happened to me. So my family, I also come from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad's a business coach. My mom has her financial licenses, and my mom's side of the family, they all owned a restaurant. So constantly these people would tell me like, oh, Macy, you should remember this and you should remember this and you should remember that. But obviously I'm 10 and I don't care. But now that I'm 21 and I'm in business for myself and I've been doing all these things, now I'm like, oh, there's no wonder they were telling me these stories. So I'm just curious, do you have anything like that where you kind of given advice at a young age that maybe you didn't fully listen to, but now that you're older, you're like, oh, I get it. I totally understand this now.
So much, so much. So, my father's land surveying business really took off around the real estate boom in like 2006.
Oh, wow.
So, getting into 2007, 2008, I'm a senior in high school, and the real estate market, as you know, fell out. A lot of people were impacted by that, especially in Florida, and he was not prepared. He didn't have good financial advice, didn't have a good accountant.
Mm,
That led to tax issues, cash flow issues, so many things that could have easily been rectified now that I know what I know. But then it was
mm,
just this insurmountable wall that the family business ran into, and it ultimately killed the business. It
mm,
altered the course of my family. Lost homes and cars, and or lost our home, lost cars. My parents got divorced over it, or in a roundabout way.
mm.
So
Wow.
yeah, I learned a lot about business the hard way, during those high school years,
Oh,
kind of
wow.
watching all of that go down. And I got into business with my grandfather in the insurance and bail bonds agency, and he didn't use a P&L or a balance sheet. He didn't have financial statements. He was showing me how to balance a checkbook on a big yellow legal pad. And I wish I still had one to this day because it's hilarious. There was just pages and pages and pages of like chicken scratch numbers with no labels, no nothing, just numbers. And he knew what they all were, but there was no way to know how stable the business was with that information. So when I took over, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur and I thought I knew what that meant, but I was underprepared and ended up failing in my first business because of it.
Oh, wow. That's a really great story. I really appreciate you sharing that because it's hard to talk about those things. You know, we like to come on interviews and we like to talk about how great our lives are and how great our business is. But it's really important to share the vulnerable sides of our businesses and our stories because that's ultimately what shapes
Absolutely.
us.
Well,
Um,
and because that's so many people's stories, right? There's
right.
so many family businesses out there that, the second generation or even third generation, they take it over and, maybe they don't have all the legacy information or they don't have that complete picture. And then they end up
Mm,
failing and losing their families, what they view as their family's legacy. And that's a
yeah.
major impact.
For sure. And I think that's a great segue into talking a little bit about your business, right, with Right Exit. Because I've been talking about this with a few business brokers before. And what's really important, I've learned when you want to sell a business or when you're even contemplating selling a business, right, is are you able to transfer that, all of your systems in place to the next person? Because I was
Yeah.
sharing a story, my family owned a Chinese restaurant. My aunt was like the sole person running the show. She was doing everything, anything that you think I don't know, any responsibility that the restaurant even slightly had, she took care of it. Ordering, all of the taxes, I don't even know how she did it and how she had energy at the end of the day, how she did it for like 20 years. But the hard part about that is she could never take a vacation because she could never communicate to anyone else like, hey, like you should take care of this responsibility or that responsibility. So when it came to her retiring from the restaurant, there was no chance that she could ever sell the restaurant. She had to only sell the building. So can you talk a little bit about, having those systems in
Yeah.
place? How early should someone talk to you if they're contemplating selling that business?
Finding a buyer is pretty easy. There's a lot of people
Hmm,
out there to buy businesses. But even still, and I'm gonna throw some statistics out there at you,
perfect.
but even still, and if you talk to other business brokers, you probably heard this too. But even with the number of buyers that are out there on the market, still the businesses that are listed for sale, only 25% that are listed actually sell.
Hmm,
75% of sellers regret selling within 12 months of selling their business. And almost a third businesses of the businesses sold won't last 12 months with the new owner.
wow.
So it's so important to have your processes and systems in place to make sure it's transferable, and to sell the business when it's making money, not when it's on decline, so that you can have a profitable exit, but also the business has a good chance of surviving for your employees and for your customers or clients who enjoy your services.
Yeah.
So I think, ideally, like minimum 18 months. It typically takes 6 to 12 months to sell a business. So if we have 6 months leading up to it, we can do some planning. But 3 years would be even better. But I
Okay.
mean, the real answer is like you should run your business like it's always for sale. Like if you could be
Hmm.
thinking about that all the time, that would be ideal because a business that's ready to sell is also a business that's ready to grow. A sellable
Mm.
business is just a good business operational strategy, right? That's all it is.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice for any business owner. No one wants to think about it when they're getting started, maybe of, oh, well, I'm never going to sell my business. I'm going to keep it forever. I'm going to keep it within the
Yeah.
family, which is very idealistic sometimes. But it's always great to kind of think of the worst case scenario, like, oh, I have to sell my business tomorrow. Am I going to be all set? Which is unfortunately a lot of people, you know, it's hard to make those planning. And that's kind of where you can step in, right, Daniel? Can you talk a little bit about what you do for people and how you help them?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, my 60 second at BNI yesterday, I said I wanted to talk about art, and I compared business to a work of art where the
Mm,
artist puts their work out to the world to be enjoyed, and it evokes emotion and feelings, and there's a responsibility to the art, a stewardship. Once the artist puts it out there, they can't go and paint a mustache on it or take it back, right? You're not
right.
supposed to betray the audience in that way. And I think that entrepreneurship is the exact same. When you put a
Mm,
business out there to the world, you evoke emotions and feelings within your customers and your clients and your employees. And I believe that we have a responsibility to be good stewards of these businesses.
mm,
And what that means is that when you start a business that's successful and creating value for a community, we also have the responsibility to find the next steward when we have someone else take it over. And
yeah.
like it or not, we will all exit our businesses. That could
Right.
be, that could be closing the business, that could be passing away, that could be, something tragic, or it could be transferring it to your kids or a family member or to an employee like a manager. That could be selling it to a third party or selling it to an investor like private equity. But at the end of the day, we will all exit our business.
Yeah.
And so that's where we come in. We focus on not just posting the business up for sale and putting someone on 40 different interviews with potential buyers. We put a lot of effort into pre-vetting buyers and getting the business right to sell so that the seller isn't one of the 75% that regrets it within 12 months and the business isn't one of the 1/3 that fail in the first 12 months. We want to help our business owners find the right buyer, get the
Mhm.
right price that they need, and to make sure that the timing is right for them.
Yeah, that's really important. I'm so glad. And I really loved the art comparison because, kind of going back to my family's story, they closed the restaurant down in 2019. Everyone retired, everything was great. But because of COVID, the gentleman who bought the land could never do anything with it for a very long
Mm.
time. And eventually he sold it off to another company and stuff like that. And for the past 5 years, the building has stayed dormant, right? It's abandoned, there's nothing there. But last week, they actually started demolition. And we made a post on Facebook about it on our old business Facebook page. And we said, hey, if you guys have any footage of the demolition, send it to us. Within 5 minutes, at least five different people had footage, which means these people went out of their way, even without knowing, like they just saw it and they said, oh, I need to record this. I need to take photos. This was an important building to me. And all of the comments are filled with, we're so
Wow.
sad. We're still so sad. We miss your food every single day. We still think about, this dish or that dish or that dish. That invoking that emotion is so important, and it's so true. And I've seen it, and I can't believe it. I'm like, I know the restaurant meant a lot to me, but I don't know you people, and it still meant a lot to you guys. So that it's really special to see that
Yeah,
response.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, when you and I connected a few days ago, you shared that you had a really great BNI success story. So I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about that story and just kind of the power of BNI, even when maybe sometimes we specifically don't see what the benefit is immediately.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, having BNI behind you, it's like having a sales team of, 30 plus people that are just actively out in the community. So you find opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise known about. Last year, I had a great opportunity to work with a retiring clothing boutique owner. It was a second business that she started after a divorce, so it was kind of her second take on life, second phase, and she was ready to retire and was thinking about having a liquidation, like a typical retirement sale,
Mm.
like you see with retail
Right.
stores. And when we looked at her inventory, she was probably going to walk away with $150,000 or so. She had about 200,000 in inventory, but with discounts and things, you wouldn't get the whole amount. But we looked at the historic cash flow, and the business had been cash flowing like you wouldn't believe. So we put together a financial model and we put together some marketing materials, and we went out and I brought in some buyers that we pre-vetted, and we ended up instead having finding a buyer who offered $900,000 in cash.
Wow.
Yeah, so instead of a $150,000 kind of consolation prize to close the business, she walked away with almost $1 million.
Wow.
And the benefits of BNI being able to educate a community, it's just there's nothing like it. I mean, there's other networking events and whatnot, but the structure of BNI encourages people, and you're only a good fit of a BNI chapter if you are willing to go out
Mm.
and educate the community and be an active member of
Mhm.
of the either entrepreneurial community or just even your local community.
Definitely. That's such a powerful story. And I think you mentioned that, when you connected with her, neither of you guys really expected to see something like that. I think it was just a BNI connection. You mentioned you're like, oh, you should at least just talk to Daniel kind of thing. And again, we always discount, I think maybe ourselves or, oh, we feel like we're bothering people sometimes, like, oh, you're already made your mind. There's no reason to talk to Daniel. But if she
Yeah.
had never talked to you, just only 100, not only 150,000, but obviously in comparison to 900, it's
Right.
definitely a huge difference, especially it's your second business, you're retiring, you don't want to have to think about other stuff. So that's such a powerful BNI story. You never know, who knows. And we have our 30 people behind us in our own chapter, but Daniel and I aren't even in the same chapter. And I think we had a really great one-to-one recently where we're always looking for each other to find referrals. So thank you so much for sharing. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate it. I don't know why I've gotten really into topics like these recently. Business brokering, I think learning all about the history of business, selling a business, what it takes is super fascinating. So I appreciate you coming on. This was super fun for me. I hope you had a great time as well.
Me too. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. And to everyone watching, I appreciate you as well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.